Yeah, greetings and salutations, all you beautiful individuals. It is another reppy of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you for a little bit of weekend recap slash global power rankings. Had the finale of the regular season in both the LPL and the LCK, so things obviously about to get even more spicy. And unfortunately, a squad we will not be seeing in playoffs in the LCK, but is roaring through the standings despite being 6-20. If you've watched the DN Supers over the last month, it's a tragedy that this team is already out of playoffs, because honestly, they might make some noise. They're nearly perfect gaming teams now.
Absolutely. One of the wild stories of a wild year in the LCK. And no question, the DN Supers getting a little bit of some special treatment, making their way onto this list and into this kind of power ranking recap type of scenario where, yeah, you got to look through every week, the last couple of weeks. Absolutely. And very much so this past weekend as well, keeping that momentum rolling for the DN Supers. And very much so one of those ones where, again, it is that pain point, but it is more than fair and reasonable to see the path that leads to them not having an opportunity for those playoffs. But certainly one of those squads that has turned it up in the last couple of weeks.
4 out of 5 series they've won. It's just when you start 1-19, it makes it a little difficult to make any type of noise, so they are not going in to that play-in stage. We will be seeing both IG and not LGD. They will not be in that play-in stage. They get the bump up after they've been going toe-to-toe. They take a game off of BLG. They follow that up by beating World Elite and Thunder Talk to kind of prove, even now in a matchup against top Esports in the first round of playoffs, wouldn't be that crazy an upset right now.
No, and you absolutely cannot overlook them. If you're any squad really in the LPL right now, never mind a squad like Top Esports, which is constantly going to be under that fraud watch type of scenario, no matter what position they find themselves in that top area of the LPL. Very much so one of those ones where I'd be scared of a squad like LGD, and especially that job that they did in this past week, as you lay out, getting that win against BLG and then hanging on, not dropping that other shoe, right? The other foot coming down and waiting for them to, okay, well, now you're going to regress type of. They've held on to that form that they were in that series, and very much so one of those ones where, again, you look at Top Esports and you see what they're doing, you see what they have, where they've stumbled and faltered in the last little bits. Very much so one of those ones where I'd be looking at LGD as that upset option in the playoffs.
Yeah, and as I said, they're not going to that play-in stage. They're a team to watch. We had the next man up dark horse throwdown between IG and NIP, the rematch. IG looked like they would maybe take game one before NIP came storming back and eventually swept them away, and got to give the mega shout out to NIP Care, because this guy has been elite this split in the LPL and kind of completely styled all over IG in back-to-back games.
Yeah, and it has been a big time level up from Care this year, right? This is certainly one of those players that, has been kind of hovering around some of these labels within the LPL as far as what his talent is. And, are you absolutely going to bring out the stone and chisel to put in? This is how you think about this guy. This has been a changing year for someone like Care and how he has been able to push this NIP roster. And I think it's really one of those ones where, unfortunately for IG, this is going to hurt you, because getting, again, the head-to-head and losing that one again, that one is the pain point for me when you're looking at both of these teams as options to rise on up out of that lower tier of the LPL. Still nothing, eliminating either one of these squads in that type of sense from their journey or long trip to try and achieve one of these world championship spots.
But like NIP now matching up against EDG, who, even though they've picked up some wins at the end of the split, NIP are going to be big. Maybe not big, but most definitely favorites in that one. And even IG versus Thunder Talk going up against this higher group, I think IG probably still the favorites in that to get to the main playoff draw.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones where maybe you kind of hold yourself back a little bit and looking again at that ultimate goal of a world championship appearance for both of these squads. But if you recalibrate your sights and are looking more in that short term, taking care of business against Thunder Talk, against an EDG within these first rounds that you're moving on up in the LPL, very much so on the table for both of these squads.
It's sandwiched in between those two LPL head-to-heads. You got two very different trajectories this week in Team Secret Wales and KT Rolster. TSW back on track in the playoffs. They 3-1 GAM and 3-0 sweep CFO after they stole the first seed in the LPL to get back to the grand finals for CFO to await the winner there. And KT, all of a sudden, has the longest series losing streak in the entire LCK. That's including the Rise group.
This feels like the unfortunate repercussion of what was last year and the improbable run that KT was able to make on through, despite, again, such being beaten up on by everybody else in this top group. Can you do it again? Because this seems to be the path that KT has unfortunately fallen down into once again. I think there was maybe a little bit more room or a little bit more moments where they seem to be holding position or holding ground within that top order of the LCK. As the weeks have gone by and as this slide has continued, very much so one of those ones where you look at them in this, outside of the picture type of situation compared to everybody else in that top tier of the LCK.
Yeah, and it's tough to find the angles where you can feel solid about them. We're far removed from Fenrir coming in, making a great debut, and you feeling good about that. I mean, BDD still individually is playing well. Perfect is getting solo kills, but there's a whole lot of things to be feeling very suspect about KT Rolster right now. Team Vitality hangs out still in that 13th spot. They got another win. Quietly have a 5-series win streak that we're talking about them. Carzzy has had some very dominant individual games, and your boy Fiesta continues to quietly be a top 3 mid laner in the LEC this split.
This has been one of the kind of, I'm not going to go like overboard and say this is, you're running downstairs and telling your parents, oh my God, did you see this? Look what Vitality's doing. Whatever. But you're absolutely going to be pretty thrilled with how things have gone this split and making the changes that you did and seeing the results that you have been able to put through. You're in a pretty good position if you are this Vitality squad. And as you've mentioned, looking a lot better of a position over the last 2 or 3 weeks here as you have been able to build together this type of streak, this type of run, where I think, again, a Vitality squad, this is certainly one of those teams that shouldn't really be looking at anybody in this playoff picture and not envisioning that they can find a way to make this series count, make it to those deciding type of games, very much so. I think that is one of those paths that a squad like Vitality could be looking at in the LEC.
Despite not being as dominant in the regular season, I feel more comfortable that they're not going to collapse when playoffs roll around. This version of Vitality. Finally on this list, you get the leapfrog, the head-to-head 2-0 that JDG threw down on Top Esports. And momentum-wise, these are completely opposite directions as we lock into playoffs for these two squads.
Totally different directions right now. This is a JDG squad that I think, again, it could have been a little bit more impressive with what they did against EDG recently, but when you look at that Top Esports head-to-head, you gave them the credit in that matchup, and you want to continue that one as you're moving on through in this area where this is a good stretch for this JDG roster. I think that there have been, of course, a little bit of down, a little bit of ups, and all the way through this type of thing, but very much so one of these teams that has been rounding into form, into contention and competition in a very good way in this later part of the LPL split.
And again, we got a little bit of a Zhao Fang sighting in that whole EDG series, and even though it took them 3 games, by that 3rd game it was a full steamroll kill per minute rate for JDG. So still a bit of a tease, this team. We see the ceiling, we see the potential, go, oh, there they are, they're the main contenders to BLG, and then the next 2 series are going, oh, never mind, I don't trust this team at all.
Yeah, but still one of these teams where I think that upside presents itself more than the negative or the collapse type of situation when you're looking at them. And it's just really a question of whether this hits its peak, it hits its stride in time to qualify for that world championship, or if this is going to be one of those projects where unfortunately doesn't reach that peak this year and is going to have to turn the page to next year to try and reach its maximum potential.
As Top Esports gets bumped out of that top 10, we get a little bit of promotion for Lion Gaming, who didn't play, and by proxy G2 Esports, who again, as we're filming this, just completely stomped Giant X in Game 1. I'd be very surprised if they get reverse swept by Giant X. We'll see how that one obviously plays out. But G2 and, of course, Lion, now inspired, going to be back. Just ready to see them prove it in playoffs.
And I think that I'm going to call this one the broadcast buff from having inspired and some of the rest of the pros on for the LCS this past week. A bit of a circus show, but that is on brand for the LCS.
And that's how you made this weekend of not interesting matchups interesting, right?
Exactly. So I want to give Lion a little bit of some credit, a little bit of positivity in that angle, but they've been holding strong, holding position, and holding this type of potential for the LCS right now. And this position is what you want to see from them. And a squad like G2, as you mentioned, taking care of business very much so in that first game against Giant X, and expect that to continue. The only disappointing thing about G2 at this moment right now is that the Caps Hollow Legend skin comes out as Tristana, and it's kind of very underwhelming, I think, to a lot of either the LEC faithful or the G2 faithful.
Yeah, and we can't punish G2 for that one. We can punish Riot for, a very lackluster, expensive skin that doesn't really encapsulate what Caps is all about, but maybe they'll fix something. Maybe they'll listen to the community. Maybe it's already all locked in and nothing will actually change. Team Liquid obviously didn't play, so they're staying pretty there. KC had a little whoopsies against Shifters in that first game, but again, bounced back pretty swiftly to take care of business. And 7-0, you're matching up against Shifters. Got to be hard to be motivated for that matchup, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and you're starting to maybe get to the point, to the core of what it means to be a squad like KC, like a Team Liquid, where you're carving into this top 10 type of territory. The demand is that you're perfect. That is really how it has to be. You have to be at that type of level in order for people to start envisioning, start giving you those chances on the international stage. Because again, we're talking about this global scenario, recapping the weekends, that's where everyone's eye is towards, that big prize, these international meetups and everything else. So that's one of those things where I think when you are a squad like Carmine Corp, you again, it's tough because that's what the bar is and that's what everyone's looking for, and that's maybe unfair, but that's what it means to be one of these teams that is vying for this type of territory within the global scene. You're going to get docked in a performance that is unfortunately not perfect against the Shifters, but still good enough on the day.
And I mean, truthfully, both those squads, you need a best of probably 5 series win against the other top teams to crack into that at least top 6, and that's with a T1 that you're left going into playoffs going, okay, you got it done against a weak sauce KT roster, and then you match up against Hanwha Life, and this was very much a weekend of styling Lee Sins in the LCK, but T1, the Zeus, Doran is your father memes were pretty put to bed in this matchup.
Yeah, that card was not activated whatsoever in this matchup, and this is one of those ones where, if you were sounding the alarm bell when Painter comes in and there are these losses that follow in that situation, I think you'd be going a little bit too crazy. But I think right now, seeing the way that the streak has gone and the performances that we have gotten in this past week and how lackadaisical I think they are really from this T1 lineup that needs to be thriving and firing on all cylinders to maintain pace at this top tier in the LCK, it gets harder to envision or to count on that T1 that in these playoff type of scenarios, the pressure, the bigger matches, the lead up to the World Championship, that has historically got it done. The question is now, is it going to be history again, that you just line on up and you fall back into the momentum and there it is, T1 is locking up their spot and moving on through? Or is this part of the slide where you cannot escape out of this type of momentum, this type of trajectory? And again, the landscape of the LCK is not going to wait for you. It's going to keep moving. It's going to keep progressing. Teams like GenG, Hanwha Life, D plus Kia, they're all picking up their wins when they can. Tough luck for T1.
At the very least, you look at, are there 4 teams in the LCK better than T1? You know, of course, they're getting 4 seats. There's 3. Look at the board right here. There's 3 teams you're feeling better about them than right now. But having 5-6 days off before their next playoff series, I expect to see a very different looking T1 when this best of 5 playoff run does roll around. But I mean, talk of these other 3 LCK squads. Hanwha Life and DK are neck and neck. You know, you have D plus lose to Hanwha, and then follow that up with a absolute lucid Lee Sin masterclass against GenG.
Oh, and this is the type of thing that turns a doubter into a believer right here. These type of performances, bounce backs from a squad like DK and keeping pace in that top tier of the LCK. Something that, again, we haven't seen in a lot of years out of a squad like DK, and especially in this type of scenario. You could look back to last year where you faltered, where you had so many great opportunities to set yourself up and hopefully build up to being a challenger in this tier, and you were not. So looking at this roster now, this time around, and what the job they have done in hanging on in this position and keeping some of that pace at that top end of the LCK, got to give DK their credit for what they have done so far. And I think in the same type of vein, keeping that on with Hanwha Life, staying in this type of position of the LCK is a good course correction, I think, in a lot of people's minds, and really solidifying themselves in that top echelon of the LCK, where a lot of people thought they deserved or would have been in the end of the first split, but it didn't work out that way. Here we are now, and Hanwha Life is in that area of the LCK.
Yeah, and I mean, D plus beating GenG is enough to knock them out of that top spot on this board, combined with needing 3 games against KT. But the reason DK can't be that much higher is because Hanwha already beat them this week and followed that up with not just a 2-0 against T1, but a really never in doubt they were going to win this series 2-0, and Kanavi puts on a Lee Sin masterclass of his own. Seeing Lee Sin now be able to kick bodies into other champions as they die with his ulti was that was an absolute treat.
Oh, that was pretty fun. I think that this is one of those ones where, unfortunately for the LCK, having a squad like DK hang around, keep pace, and show that they are in this top trio at the very least at the top of the LCK, has prevented one of these LCK squads from claiming that top spot. I think BLG hangs on just by the slimmest of margins in that regard, by not having one of these squads keep running away and picking themselves up. And so that's the story at the top. When you look at it that type of way, you got to know that BLG, yes, they are there, and yes, they, course correct, maintain themselves in that position in the LPL. But you got to be looking over your shoulder, because it is not a lot separating you from what these top tier teams in the LCK are showing you. And yeah, there's 3 of them hanging on around here.
Yeah, I think this board has now kind of firmly become a top 4, and then the rest of these rankings, as T1 has slipped a little bit, and even AL just barely holding on to this 5 spot, only because T1 hasn't looked that good lately, because AL actually dropped a few series in a row, even though there were multiple 40-minute games in their finale against BLG. You now look at BLG and, they beat Top Esports convincingly on the Friday. They bounced back, not even bounced back. They beat AL. They put Flandre back in so he can play against his former team. I got to imagine that was the main reason, unless it's been drama. But Knight has another solid series. Viper absolutely gliding on the Ashe in this one, even with the 6-man top lane roster. 5 series in a row for BLG heading into playoffs.
And what a story this year has been, that you can look at all that, right? And then, circle back around to T1 being outside of that top 5 And it leads down two paths, right? Is this just simply that T1 isn't at this type of form? They're not at that type of level. They're not going to get there. Or is it one of these ones where, yeah, take all that into consideration, but you got to look outside of just that picture of the top 5 to consider who really can be one of these threats, because that even T1 lurking outside the top 5, which crazy, lurking outside the top 5 is considered, lurking type of territory for a T1. But that's just their history, what they have done over the last, decade of this game, and what they have built that dynasty legacy off of is pulling out situations like this. So I'm waiting to see on if they truly have slipped and slided into a position where they can't get themselves out of, or if this is just one of those ones baiting everybody, including the top 5 teams, into a false sense of security.
Yeah, and again, these are going to vary quite a bit as playoffs do roll around. We obviously don't know who T1's opponent is going to be, but as I said, no team is better with even a little bit of time off, 5-6 days to prepare and kind of flip a switch to get into playoff mode than what T1 has been able to do. But the BLG side, I don't see this team losing until finals. I'm not smelling some dark horse upset between a lower tier team this time around.
It's flat out, again, and it's crazy that this is even the possibility that you're talking about it. The only way that this gets disrupted or derailed for a squad like BLG is off the riff drama, is just any of those question marks that we have had about Bin, about who's in that top side. What is the morale around the team? Is the coaching staff aligned with the players? All these type of, kind of stupid, small little questions are the questions that stick in the back of your mind that prevent you from going all in on the BLG dominance of this year of either the LPL or the international scene. Gonna be a crazy time ahead of us here as we move into playoffs, and the big movers and shakers action is gonna happen.
Yeah, and obviously more impact on the LCK playoffs, or more on the line because it's just top 4 go to Worlds. The LPL still has a whole regional gauntlet for the final 2 seeds that they'll have to get through. But gonna be spicy, no question. But that is all the time today. For Liga Unlock, Eric and Mark here with you, absolute stunners. Thanks for hanging out as always. We'll catch you on that flippity flip.